Right. Good afternoon, everybody. It's just a 1 minute warning. So 1 minute warning. Right. Good afternoon, everybody. 2 o'clock on the dot. Are we ready to live stream? We are. Okay. In which case, welcome everybody to the Integrated Care Board meeting for March 2023. Time seems to go very quickly, doesn't it? So let me just kick off with a reminder to us all that we are live streamed. So the members of the public can hopefully hear everything that is said and then participate in appropriate ways. First of all, then a welcome as well around the table to new members. So Fanwell, welcome. And I'm sure you know perhaps almost everybody, if not everybody, Fanwell. But do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. And thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. So my name is Fanwell Mtumburi, and I'm joining the board for a period of 6 months. And, you know, it's really exciting to be here. My interest comes from a community perspective. I am a director of a local charity for the last 11 years, the Ipswich and Suffolk Council for Racial Equality, but I've also been involved in this space as well from the CCG days. I currently chair the executive delivery group for the Ipswich and East Alliance and also the primary care commissioning group. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Fanwell. Thank you very much. And also welcome to members of the public, of course. So kicking off into the business of the meeting, notification of questions from members of. We have actually had 7 questions, I believe, raised thus far. And I think, as far as I know, unless people shake their head in response to my question, I think we're ready as a team to answer those questions at the end of the meeting. And we'll also deal with any other questions which are raised during the meeting to the extent we can. And Simon, as usual, are you onto that in terms of collating and noting? Thanks very much. Okay. Apologies for absence. Joe, what have we got?
Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Reid and Laura Taylor-Green.
Excellent. So good attendance. Thanks very much, everybody. In which case, let's move on then to declarations of interest. So do any board members have any declaration of interest or potential conflict of interest with any agenda item today, other than those of which we're already aware, of course? So no declarations of interest made. Let's then go on to minutes of the previous meeting, the 24th of January 2023. There's 15 pages, but let's do them for accuracy first. And I think, Howard, you were going to raise a couple of points, so over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So it's in relation to section 23018. The third and fourth bullet points don't specify what the underspends or overachievements are for. So the third bullet point should read as an underspend of 1.1 million against the running cost allocation. And the fourth bullet point acknowledges an overachievement on that should read the mental health investment standard.
Okay, so amendments to a couple of the bullets in 23018. Is everybody content with those specifically? Nods, yep, all agreed. Any other issues? Let's try and deal with them en bloc rather than turning over the 15 pages one by one. Any other issues regarding accuracy of the minutes? or subject to those two amendments as suggested by Howard, are we content to accept the draft as a true and accurate record? Agreed. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. In which case, then, let's move on to matters arising and the review of actions therefrom. So let's deal now. There's a few of these. I've got half a dozen, I think. Let's do 22060 first. Digital care technology. Andrew.
So I've got a verbal update on that. I'll read it out. Following up the action to understand opportunities and alignments around digital technologies, transformation and capacity in Suffolk and North East Essex. Key strategic leads in Suffolk North East Essex Digital and Data Programme Management Office, Suffolk County Council and Essex County Council are undertaking a mapping exercise of the digital landscape. This will include engagement with key digital leaders across Suffolk and North East Essex to understand the current position and position recommendations around areas such as clinical and practice capacity, digital change capacity, digital initiatives and governance. Final recommendations and an associated report will be presented at the ICB in May 2023, agenda space allowing.
So May 23. Everybody content with that update? Yeah. Andrew, thank you very much. Let's then go on to 22066, the BAF. Amanda, could I ask you to pick that one up?
Sure, thank you very much, Chair. May I suggest that we actually take this action forward when we have our board development session on the 18th of April? I think that question that was posed last time would play nicely into how, as a board, we actually manage all things board assurance and the like.
Okay, is everybody content that we take that as an action? And then Amanda, could we then close it from the action log? Yeah. Everybody happy? Good. Thank you very much. 22076, the Palantir update. Can I come to you, Ed?
Thank you. There isn't an update on this, so our head of digital has been asking NHS England for an answer to the question, and we haven't received one as yet, Chair. So we're a little stuck on this one. I know this was a question from Anthony in the audience, so I'm not quite sure where else we can take it at the present moment.
I suppose the only thing that we could perhaps reasonably do is another prompt to NHSE. Should we take that as an action?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Thank you very much. In which case, 23014, the AHP update. I think we perhaps need a bring back date. Amanda, could I come to you for that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So in terms of the first action under that minute, having spoken to Ganesh, he says that the conversations are alive and in hand. And I think he has spoken to yourself, Nick, on that item.
Yeah, you're content? Yeah.
And then with regards to the second action, again, having discussed with Ganesh on the back of the last board meeting, we are planning to bring an item to the June board development session, which indeed is now on the forward planner.
Okay, so, and Amanda, with that update, are you suggesting we close that as an action because it's scheduled? Everybody happy? Good, thank you very much. 23015, the oral health update. Again, Ed, can I come to you?
Yeah, I understand it from Lizzie that's been actioned. Kirsten, just...
Yes, that's right. We've made some progress. I've met with the Commissioner a couple of times and we've got our very first meeting with some voluntary sector representatives this week. Okay.
And again, are you content that we take that as complete? Yeah, board agreed, complete. Good. And then finally, I think, finally from my point of view, subject to, we'll come back to see if board members have got anything else in a moment, but 23027, there were a series of questions from the public that we could perhaps take a further update on. The first one is the Felixstowe demand. Now, Maddie, are you able to give an update on your visits that you went on? Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. So I went with colleagues from ESNEFT and we met with the Friends of Felixstowe Hospital and subsequently have also met with all of the patient participation groups and the GP surgeries within Felixstowe. We have agreed a terms of reference for a review of understanding the demand and capacity within the town and its broader surrounds. We have not yet secured support to undertake the review. That's ongoing. But this is being also closely monitored by the Alliance Committee, as colleagues will be aware. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Everybody content with that? Now, I think from my point of view, they were the outstanding updates that were required, but are there any other points that board members would like to flag from the list? Yeah, Amanda?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just go back to the item 23022?
Yep.
The update on that is, and I think it is still an open action, I did make the suggestion at the last People Committee in terms of having system alignment. I think in summary, there is further work that is needed across the system. So the next action is from the People Committee. I'm taking it into the SNE HR Directors Forum to progress.
Okay, so suggestion here is board delegates that action to People Committee.
Yeah.
Everybody content with that? Agreed. Thank you very much. Any other points that colleagues like to make? Richard?
Just under 23027, the second part related to the ME service from Barbara. So the team is putting together a response. It's with me tonight to look at, and then it'll be sent. There is an element related to public health, though, so we just need to talk to Stuart and Sue, because part of the question is not within our remit. But I actually saw Barbara at one of the JFP events, so we did talk about elements of this as well.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Any other points, comments? So are we content with that update from the action log? And then I think we take it that we are, unless anybody's disagreeing. Agreed. And then finally, are you as a board content that the action log captured the actions that it should have done from the previous meeting and was therefore complete? Everybody agrees. Done. Okay, thanks very much. In which case, let's move on to agenda item 6, the general update. Ed, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So we thought we'd use this item to invite Amanda to give a summary on the industrial action, which has been a kind of a key priority for the system. And thank you for everyone involved in that magnificent response that we put together. But just a few other updates before we come to Amanda. I mean, firstly, congratulations to Stuart and team at NSFT. Their recent CQC has moved them to requires improvement, which represents all the hard work that's taken place at the Trust and to a lesser degree in the system to support the Trust over many months. So we're very pleased about that. And we're obviously going to be talking about the Suffolk Mental Health Collaborative later today, and we see that as a piece of governance that will support that forward progress. In addition, around mental health and wellbeing, and particularly learning disability, Tom Cahill, who's the national lead for learning disability and autism, visited our system and is putting us forward as an exemplar for the changes we've made in terms of reducing the number of inpatients and supporting people to live independently in the community, but also the work around peer educators with ACE Anglia and the work around LD health checks. So we're very pleased to be making progress for that client group. The spring COVID booster campaign will launch in April, so the preparation's ready for that. And people that will be eligible will be the over 75s, care home residents and the immunosuppressed. And Liz Maloney, who's our operational lead in the ICB, will continue to work with all partners to ensure that's a successful campaign again. We're approaching and have reached a number of landmarks in the system. So we're waiting with bated breath for the confirmation of the allocation for the new West Suffolk Hospital. Every day I think we're hoping it's arrived, and we keep hoping it will arrive very soon, and that will obviously be very exciting news for all of us. The Dame Clare Marks Orthopaedic Centre at Colchester is starting to be built, which is incredibly exciting, and the new breast care centre at Ipswich Hospital has opened, and there's a visit from the Chief Executive of NHS England on Friday to visit that centre. The Council for Voluntary Services and Tendering, who are an absolutely key partner in the North East Essex Alliance and in the whole system, are celebrating 50 years. So they've got a programme of events scheduled over the next year to celebrate all the work they've done since 1973. And of course, they support over 50 groups in the tendering area and make a significant difference to that population. And then finally, just very pleased to see that the North East Essex Alliance have invested almost £500,000 of grants to 18 different organisations to support loneliness, social isolation and suicide prevention. So some very excellent decisions being made in that alliance in that regard. There's been a lot of work on operational planning as well as delivery in the system, which we'll come on to later, but particular focus on obviously the urgent emergency care planning, elective recovery in cancer, and financial planning. And I think it'd be fair to say that the financial planning context is one of the most challenging I think the health service has faced for many years. As an ICB, well, as all ICBs, we're also, as part of that financial position, facing running cost reductions of around 30%, or exactly 30%, over the next 2 years, and we'll be talking about that later this afternoon. And then finally, it's just to recognise that on Thursday it's 3 years since the start of the pandemic, so there'll be a national day of reflection to remember all the lives lost and all of the efforts that everyone made during that period of time. So I just wanted to recognise that. But Amanda, do you want to give us an update, please?
Thank you very much, Ed. So in terms of industrial action, I think last week we saw unprecedented industrial action take place over 72 hours within our system and indeed up and down the country. And I'm sure we all read in the press that we actually had something like 86,000 junior doctors nationwide participate in that 72-hour period. And of that, we also may have read that 175,000 patient appointments and procedures were cancelled. If we translate that to SNE, we know that we actually had quite a high number of our juniors participating in industrial action, something like 80% of the junior doctor workforce. And in terms of the number of patient appointments and procedures cancelled, significant numbers were recorded each day. Now, we also will have read that further industrial action has now been paused until we actually receive the outcome of what's currently happening, and that is 14 of our trade unions are now going back to their members with the pay deal that was announced last week, and we envisage that will take place over the next 3 to 4 weeks. So we think come the middle of April, we will get confirmation of that pay deal, and hopefully there'll be no further industrial action planned, but it is paused for now. In terms of the junior doctors, we know that the BMA are in current discussion with government, so we await further information. But just going back to the last week and the 3 days, I think I would want to say that the system was superb, great collaboration at a time of immense pressure. And I think that was played out on the many calls that we had morning, noon and night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, either locally as SNE or indeed as part of the region. There was a lot of hard work and effort played into that process, and I think the events of the last few months even played into how we actually worked as a system. So a big thank you to system providers for making what was a really incredible task as pain-free as it possibly could be. But it was very difficult, but I think we managed it superbly because of the great teamwork and the great collaboration and the great planning that went into it. And I know Andrew went out to visit a couple of the picket lines, didn't you? Did you want to add anything from your perspective, Andrew?
Just to highlight that I spent some time talking to all the junior doctors on the picket lines. Some of them were out literally in the pouring rain for hours. So they put their hearts and souls into what they were trying to do. What really struck me and what they all said was how supported they felt by their hospitals, by their consultants and by the hospital management teams. And I think we should probably admit that the medical community really came together to support the NHS, even in the face of quite considerable action which disrupted care.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more, Amanda?
No, that was my summary. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Ed. Are you done, Ed, as well? Yeah. And so comments, questions or thoughts from colleagues? Otherwise, are we content to receive the report, the verbal update from Ed and Amanda and indeed Andrew, and also agree with the suggestion for the thanks as to we'll minute in a formal way in the meeting as suggested. And we'll then, as a board, thank all our colleagues for that great effort in the face of, let's face it, in the face of adversity. So thank you very much. Everybody content? Good. Okay. Thank you very much. In which case, let's move on to item 7. Just before we do, and I'll come to Lisa to introduce that, you will have noticed, I'm sure it can't have passed you by, that there are 417 pages in the board pack. So I think we should take the papers as read and go for highlights to the extent that we possibly can. Otherwise, we'll still be here at midnight if we're not careful. So Lisa, over to you. West Suffolk maternity update.
Thank you, Chair. And we have Sue and Justina that have joined us from West Suffolk. I don't know, do you want to come around here, ladies? And you can sit on my seat and I'll get you another seat. But okay, thank you. I just wanted to remind the board that we had a discussion around maternity services a couple of board meetings ago, and we were celebrating the success that West Suffolk had from exiting the maternity support programme. And there was a recommendation that we invited West Suffolk to come and present on their critical success factors for their improvements. So I'm really pleased to welcome Sue, who is the Chief Nurse at West Suffolk Hospital, and Justina, who is our Head of Midwifery at West Suffolk Hospital. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Deputy Head.
Hello, and thank you very much for inviting us to join you here today, this afternoon. I'll start off by apologising on behalf of Karen Newby, who is our Head of Midwifery. Unfortunately, she's unable to attend us today, with us today, because she is at a National Neonatal Maternity Summit. I think that's correct, isn't it? So unfortunately, she was unable to attend, but myself and Justina have come to try and represent her as best we possibly can with regards to our journey through our quality improvements within the maternity, the West Suffolk maternity services. So I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Sue Wilkinson. I'm the Executive Chief Nurse, and I've been in post for 2.5 years. I joined the Trust in 2020, just as the maternity services were starting to really gather pace on their improvement programme. Justine is going to talk you through the background and to tell you a little bit more about herself and her role within the improvements. So I'll hand over to you, Justina.
That's lovely, thank you. My name is Justina Skonieczny, and I work as a Deputy Head of Midwifery at West Suffolk, and I came to this post halfway through the improvements that have been made at the time in July 2021. The slides that we've got here just summarizing the progress that have been made and the journey that we undertake to quality and safety and our culture improvement. So I would like to take this opportunity to expand on them a little bit more, just to give you a little bit of a story behind our journey. I might just move this a little bit closer to me. So our journey into improving the quality, safety and culture improvement started following the CQC inspection back in September 2019, following which we were rated as requiring improvement, and a Section 29A warning notice was issued in October 2019. At the time, we had a new Head of Midwifery in post, and a lot of support has been put in place in the form of independent midwifery advisor to support her with the role, as well as the project midwife who had extensive knowledge and experience with maternity governance to help as well. New Chief Nurse was appointed and started in June 2020 and provided a significant significant and consistent support to maternity and neonatal safety to help us in our journey to improvement. Following the if the maternity service is put on a requiring improvements, they would enter what's called maternity safety support program, and maternity improvement advisor normally will be allocated to the trust. We had a midwifery and obstetric maternity improvement advisor allocated to our trust, who visited the trust regularly and help us with the areas highlighted as concern with the CQC inspection. The number of self-assessment actions plans and reviews were undertaken to make sure that we work towards making sure that the improvements are addressed and embedded as service as usual. The new clinical director who was for the division, who was also deputy clinical medical director, was appointed, and that was a very positive move forward for us, because he came with a fresh pair of eyes looking at our service, but also representing and increase the visibility of maternity service at the board, trust board. We had announced CQC inspection in April 2021, and the CQC have revised our rating for the well-led domain from inadequate to requiring improvements. Although all the domains remain the same, they have highlighted the evidence of progression, significant change, and a cultural improvement that they have seen during the inspection. Following that, we had a numbers of different peer review assurance visits from NHS England, our local LMNS, as well as regional NHS and teams. Both of them have commented on significant improvement that have been made, and that we were addressing the concern that were raised, and we were putting them, making sure that they were put as business as usual. The last, from January 2022, then we entered what's called sustainability phase of maternity safety supportive program, and that led us, that showed that every changes that we have made were being addressed and being embedded into our day-to-day practice. Following which, we've had assurance visit in the form of 60 supportive staff and what's called Okenden assurance visit. Both of those again provided the evidence that we are really making the improvements into the quality and safety of the care provided. And following which, they were happy for us to support with our exit from the maternity safety supportive program. The formal letter was submitted to NHS England with our intention, supported by the Trust Board, to exit the program. And on the 10th of November 2022, Professor Jacqueline Dunklin-Benck has confirmed that West Suffolk has formally exited the maternity safety supportive program. Since then, we've had assurance visit led by NHS England regional team with our colleagues from LMNS, Lisa, and chair of our Maternity Voices Partnership, who visited the unit to check on our progress. And at that visit, it has been highlighted the positive improvements that have been made and embedded, and also they highlighted an area of positive practice that they wanted to share with the regional trust, which was a very positive achievement for us. So, summary of the progress that we have made. So, following the initial CQC inspection, a lot of progress have been made to change the service, and this was thanks to the insignificant investment and support that has been provided to the maternity and neonatal service to address the concern raised, as well as improve the service provided. This was in the form of strengthening the governance structure and framework, as well as leadership structure, and provide sustainability. CQC was assured that the concern related to the Section 29A warning were addressed and were embedded as business as usual. And following their visit, they also commented that they've seen evidence of progression, significant change, and cultural improvements, with a clear management and leadership structure in place. all actions arising from both CQC inspection and order, external and internal visit, have been captured on overarching quality and safety plan, and they are reviewed fortnightly until now, and will carry on to be reviewed to make sure that we to make sure that we are still improving, and if there's any areas of concern highlighted within that, they are being actioned. We also implemented professional midwifery advocate to support our staff, as well as provide support with the clinical supervision, and our risk and governance framework has been developed in line with the trust governance process. Close working relationship with local maternity and neonatal system has been developed, and they were providing external specialist opinion on progress and moving the service forward. And learning that has been shared internally and internally through LMNS Safety Forum, and also Maternity HSIB's quarterly meeting has been seen as a positive move forward, with HSIB acknowledging transparency, robust report writing, investigation, and learning from the incident in the summary. What was really important is to strengthen the triumvirate team, which head of midwifery was directly reporting to the trust board, and as a maternity triumvirate attended the trust board, highlighting the areas of good practice, areas of concern, so the trust had the oversight of progress that being made within maternity service. Moving forward, so assurance. So what happened for us, and what we continue to do is we committed to make sure that we sustain the progress that we have made and improve even further. And that is thanks to our support from the executive colleagues, having a robust safety champion forum and roles. We've got a board level safety champion that do a monthly walk up around different areas of maternity and neonatal service, when staff can raise any concern directly to them, and then they are being actioned depending on the areas of concern. We also had a structure and oversight from LMNS through the strategic group safety forum, learning from incidents that have been shared across internally and internally. NHS England and improvement teams, as well as LMNS and Maternity Voices Partnership, attends our maternity improvement board, firstly to have that external scrutiny, but also to listen to the voices of our service users. We successful implementation of perinatal surveillance model was also a good move forward into improving the quality of our internal processes. And HSIB quarterly meeting that are taking place and will continue to take place have also highlighted the good, robust reporting and investigation system into incidents that are happening. Staff and students and service users' feedback is very important to make sure that these improvements are sustainable, and we're learning from them. And we have open different type of forums to make sure that they've got a way of communicating and sharing their views with us. Our success factors. So what has helped us with the success? Having engaged and supportive chief nurse and medical director was the biggest part, as well as having maternal and neonatal safety championed, and they were part of the trust board. Direct access to the board and having a support from the trust board was had a good important role in achieving all the successes that we've had. Changing the governance structure, aligning it with the trust, as well as being open and transparent with our framework. Introducing restorative just culture to help with learning from incident. involving our Maternity Voices Partnership, which is now a Maternity and Neonatal Voices Partnership, to gain the service user feedback on the process we are making and any suggestion of how we can improve the service further. Close working relation with our Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, and we now have a champion in each of the maternity service areas for the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian champion as well. Listening to staff by using a different methods of communicating with them, forums and social media, surveys, embed perinatal surveillance model, and strengthening the working relationship with LMNS through the strategic group and the safety forum, and maternity improvement board, which allows us that regular scrutiny with the progression that we're making and looking at how we can move the service forward. Thank you. Any questions?
Are you happy we go straight for questions? Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to say this movement is to say thank you very much to Justina, Karen, and the maternity triumvirate, because they have been incredibly driven, and it hasn't been an easy time for them. We have had a number of challenges, and those of you who may remember, sort of about a year ago, we had quite a large CQC freedom to speak up situation, and it is really the things that we've learned really is that you do have to listen to your staff, you do have to listen to your service users, and you do have to take note of how people are feeling, even if you are trying your very best to deliver what you think is the right thing. They need to feel that, they need to understand it, and it needs to be at the right level. And I think the one thing we have maintained throughout this and continue to maintain is that ability for staff to come forward to either to our board level neonatal champion, or our executive medical director, or myself, and we are all very visible in the clinical environments. So the only piece of advice I would give is listen to your service users, listen to your staff, because they tell you how it really is. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Justina. Richard.
I've got two questions. That's all right to be cheeky, Chair. So the first one is great progress, amazing, given where we were. What's next, I guess, is first question. So to get to good or even outstanding that ambition, it'd just be interesting to hear from that. And then linked to that, I guess, is there anything that we can do as a board or partners to help you on getting there? Thank you.
So I think the thing to help progress us to beyond where we are now is the continued sustainable improvements that we've made, and I think it's support to do that. Really, we can't take our eye off the ball, and it's the smaller things now. We've taken the low hanging fruit. We've done what we need to do, and now it's the sort of the smaller things that we need to look at and how we can improve. You know, we need to get our training to where it needs to be. We need to get our staff survey to where it needs to be. We need to get all of those sort of key performance indicators to where they need to be every day, day in and day out, not just on a good day and when we're busy. The other thing is the recruitment of midwives. As soon as we can recruit enough midwives, we'll be in a much stronger position, but we manage very well with what we've got.
Okay, thank you very much. Ewan, can I ask you to comment as well, and particularly in relation to Richard's points about what can we do as a system to help, but also perhaps we should record thanks to colleagues, but to all colleagues, at West Suffolk here for the cultural drive that is clearly coming through here. Culture is so important, isn't it? But Ewan, over to you.
Thanks, Will. I mean, I just wanted to add my thanks to Sue, Justina, and all the many people within the Foundation Trust, but also across the system who've helped in this piece of work. Clearly, it's a difficult time in maternity services across the country, and so it's no small feat to have made the improvements that have been made. And as Sue said, the work isn't complete yet. Lots more to do, there will definitely be opportunities for us to work across the system to improve things further.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments or points from board members, or shall we simply say, well, simply sounds, I didn't mean that to be derogatory in any way, a great big thank you for, and we're only asked to note here that the report, and thank you for it, but a great big thank you for all the changes and improvements that you've clearly driven through in West Suffolk. And I think our message would be, would it not, colleagues, be keep going? Yeah, it's not the end of the story, is it? So thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, so while we do shimmy around with seats. Thank you very much, everybody. We're going now to move on to item 8, which is the report from, in this case, West Suffolk Alliance. But just to remind colleagues that we said we would bring an Alliance report in future to each meeting, and this is the first time of this new layout. So let's see how it works. Peter, over to you. Physical activity, the pathway forward. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Chairman. So I won't say too much, but this started, certainly predates me, and you remember that really inspiring chat we had at our launch of the ICS about the importance of physical activity. And I think it's one thing to talk about how important it is, and I think what you're going to hear now is what it's taken to do that in practice to date, and what our ambitions are for the future. So really pleased to welcome Jill and Warren from our West Suffolk system, and they'll take us through our story so far. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for inviting us here. Delighted to be here. I'm Jill Corwin. I'm a Strategic Director at West Suffolk Council, just to keep the West Suffolk theme going for the meeting. And my colleague, Warren, who is the CEO of Abbeycroft Leisure. And the reason you've got us as a double act is actually our relationship within the system goes back to nearly 20 years now. In terms of Abbeycroft being West Suffolk Council's strategic leisure provider. And we've been on a real journey over that time. So in terms of the presentation today, what we wanted to go through wasn't just the outcomes and the schemes that we've delivered, but to actually talk about the kind of, the groundworks, the foundations that are in place that enable us to deliver some really exciting programs and really exciting outcomes for people in West Suffolk. So to look at those foundations, yes, do a bit of showcasing in terms of what we've achieved, and then to share with you our thoughts around what those future opportunities are. So I'm going to kick off on that. We know we need to get this right. We don't need to reinforce the evidence that is out there in terms of the importance of physical activity and healthy behaviours on health outcomes. We've all got it embedded in terms of our system approach. And I've just popped up there an extract from your very own strategy in terms of the importance of being active. So if we take that as being a given, then what we've tried to do is actually make sure that we deliver on that in practice. And this is a journey that we've been on for quite a while. So in terms of those foundations, there's 3 things we wanted to touch on, which is the strategic alignment that exists, the people, and actually the place that we've got within West Suffolk. So just up there, I've just popped up a few extracts from different organisations which operate across West Suffolk, just to show that that strategic alignment is there. We have absolutely that constancy of purpose in showing that we are lined up behind getting people healthier, doing more physical activity, and with all the benefits that that will bring. But in terms of practice, how we actually do that, we think we've got 2 key ingredients that have really made a difference in terms of the way we approach that through people, through our workforce, but also through hubs. So in terms of from a people level, we have integrated teams. Now that works across both the health, social care, West Suffolk Council system, as well as working with our partners, Abbeycroft Leisure. And we've got a whole range of collaborations, which Warren is going to talk about more. But actually what we do is really kind of get aligned about what we want to deliver through that, and actually take the learning and constantly look and challenge and look to improve. And one of the key features is very much doing that in partnership with the communities that we work with, taking a very solid asset-based approach to what we do. And we'll play a video later, which isn't us talking about what we've done, but actually someone that's been through one of the pathways. The other thing I think is just really important to share is the place-based approach and our shared commitment to deliver hubs. The picture on there is Mildenhall Hub, which opened in 2021. If you haven't been there, I'd really advocate you go, because just the energy in terms of that place where you've got a co-located facility, which is a real community facility. You've got a school there, a leisure centre, the police are based there, West Suffolk Council, the County Council, got Jobs Centre there, Citizens Advice, you've got a health centre, you've got a children's centre. It's a real community place, and the buzz and the constant throughput you get, and actually the benefits we've seen from that, just looking in terms of leisure centre management, a leisure centre membership, We've seen 127% increase in membership. The library that's based there, 54% increase in usage of the library, because it's a place that is really used and valued by the community. And that relationship between using different services has proved invaluable. So we've got those ingredients, but actually focusing then on some of the actual delivery from that is where Warren and his team have come in with some really specific schemes.
Thanks, Jill. And just to give you a bit of background to Abercrombie Leisure, I think we're generally known as running your local leisure centre in West Suffolk. And generally when I turn up to a meeting, I think most people think I'm going to try and flog a membership, and that's not the case today, clearly. And what I'm trying to showcase to you will be the breadth and depth of some of the work that we're doing that is not driven around actually a gym. Because I think that's what people perceive as their local leisure centre being. And if you look inside those four walls, it's a very different picture that you'll see, a range of people that are using that service. And actually the work we've done locally in the Alliance as partners is shifting that to another level. So we are seeing very non-traditional users use our services and facilities and break down the perceptions they have of those facilities. The slide we have in front of us sort of shows some of that breadth and depth, and I could have added a lot more to that slide. I'm not going to pretend I'm going to go through everyone in detail. I'm sure you've got other things to move on to in the meeting, and I'll pick a few items out in terms of some of the difference we're making in a minute. But what sits behind that is also the collaboration, funding streams, partnerships that generate the activity you see there. And it's covering everything from physical and mental health to food poverty, loneliness and isolation. And some of the partners we're working with are people like Suffolk Mind, allied health professionals, food banks, Home Start, and other voluntary services. Every tier of local government, actually, from county councils through to district councils, through to town councils, other aspects of the health system, including the public health team, the Norfolk and Suffolk Foundation Trust, the Alliance itself. So what sits behind that is a whole collaboration of network of people that bring about initiatives that are making a change. And I could never display that. I'll mostly be here forever trying to actually demonstrate what it is. They're all playing a different role. So some of those partners are playing a role by providing finances to support some of those initiatives. Some of those are providing avenues and communications into audiences that are more vulnerable in society. Some of them are there helping us deliver services, giving their expertise. We don't pretend we're the experts in mental health. We work with Suffolk Mind in some of those aspects. We understand physical activity and the benefits that brings. So we're very careful about who we collaborate with, and we're bringing skills together to bring about an outcome. So on the right of the chart is really about where we're co-located with different services. And actually some of that's in multiple places, not just one. Jill's mentioned the Millnall Hub, but actually in Haver Hill Leisure Centre, we've got very strong MSO community midwifery services and actually sexual health clinics running out of that site. Is some of the and you will see one out as the NHS Health Family Park Cooking reaches about 2,500 families a year, and last year we delivered about 44,000 meals to families that have children on free school meals or in need of support. Now, as a leisure operator, which is what our normal term we're tagged with, that's a very different type of service than what you would normally see in a location. And that's because we get flexibility from our commissioners to run those things. So Jill's quite right to point towards 2004 when Abercrombie was set up. Actually, it's a very flexible commissioning arrangement. So this isn't a case of you just run our leisure centres. We need you to be a partner in the system to deliver a bigger outcome, actually, and contribute to a bigger agenda. On the left-hand side of the slide is a little bit more around some of the acute challenges that we're trying to work with system partners to address. And I'll come on a little bit more to that. And the Waiting Well pathway is actually just about to go live in the next couple of weeks, working with patients on the elective surgery waiting list, using physical activity as a method to try and address their needs. Digging a bit deeper, you will see, these are some specific activities, but Jill says we have a bit of a video. This is linked to our Stand Tall programme, which works with young people to address anxiety and concerns about depression. It was developed in partnership with Suffolk Mind. It's been funded by a variety of partners, actually, including the public health team at Suffolk County Council and some funding, locality funding from councillors, who you'll see in a minute. And if the technology works, hopefully you'll see that now.
So Stand Tall is an 8-week course that has been written in conjunction with Suffolk Mind, that's aimed at young people between the ages of 11 and 19 with low-level anxiety, mental health concerns. We do a 45-minute health and wellbeing workshop which covers a variety of topics from sleep, food, how to manage your well-being, and then we do a 45-minute session in the gym and studio. The first 4 weeks in the studio we do pad work and boxing, and then the next 4 weeks we concentrate on in the gym, and we teach the individuals to use the resistance machines, free weights if they're over 16 or 16 and over. At the end of it, they get a 6-month complimentary membership to encourage them to carry on doing exercise, and also how it benefits their mental health.
I think what motivated me was like I struggled with like all my problems at home, and it just really made me happy, and that I got the chance to do this.
Well, I went to a group that I was doing for my anxiety, and they kind of put us along to this course so that we could take part in this and see if it benefited us. Some of the things that we were learning when we were talking about things were new things as well that helped.
We fund a lot of things through the council, and we're very passionate about young people because they're our future. So you've got a small group here of young people who've gone through 8 weeks. They're very clear that they've gained a great deal from this, and they are now your ambassadors to go forward. I very much support this, and I will very much be supporting it in the future.
Well, it's very informal, so I learnt a lot through it about things I need help with, like my sleep, because I don't get much of it. I've noticed that I've started to eat and sleep a lot more, so that's good.
Been using the membership already to come to the gym more often and try new things, which has helped me feel more energised and help with mental health.
Well, the people that run it, because they're so nice and helpful, and they're just so understanding about everything that you talk about.
There you go. I've been fortunate enough to meet those young people in the video, and for them to appear in that video is a huge transition in an 8-week period by working with some very highly skilled individuals, more around, people's social skills, really. And it's really impressive they've been able to do that actually in that period of time. I didn't realise I'd made a guest appearance as a fitness instructor in the video, so I must get that edited out at some point, because I'm certainly not that. But yeah, moving on to another example, actually, this is our referral pathways that have been developed with West Suffolk Foundation Trust, which are funding this work. Predominantly, it's been set up to deal with pulmonary rehabilitation and frailty, falls prevention. And this infographic gives you a bit of a snapshot of an evaluation that was for August last year, and gives you some of the outcomes. I mean, I'm just going to focus on a couple. So at that point, the participants, the average improvement in their wellbeing score was 61%. All of those participants are moving from low levels of physical activity to moderate, which is generally, if you read the Active Lives survey, that's the more challenging aspect to address, actually. So they're moving from very low level activity into a moderate level of activity. It means they're building it into their lifestyle. So that's what it is. We're achieving sort of retention levels of about 85% in the program overall over a 24-week period. And there's an indication that those people are continuing that. Now, the stat we've got up there is about 25% of people remain active with Abercroft, and that was back in August. So with nearly another 6-7 months on. We know that they're also active outside of Abercroft services. So we actively refer, whilst we'd love to keep them, actually some of those people actually just go cycling, they join the park run, they do other things to make sure they continue their journey, really. The snapshot there shows that we had about 1,600 referrals at that stage. 1,900 referrals at that stage. Our current run rate is somewhere between 200 to 300 referrals a month So that is increasing dramatically, and that's off the back of the collaboration between the clinicians in terms of the work that's being done. And it's not just from West Suffolk Foundation Trust, that includes local GPs, MSK providers. Any clinician can refer into that for the conditions we're talking about. So we're really seeing an increase in demand, and hopefully we're able to scale those benefits that you're seeing there. There are some links, interestingly, between the patient enablement model, that work that's been going on in Essex as well, in terms of how that's evaluated. So there's a bit of learning most probably across partnerships and relationships in that. But I'll leave you to digest that in the future. Back to Jill.
Thank you. And conscious of time, so our last slide was really to talk about the opportunities, and they're in the pack. I think if I was to highlight a couple of them, I think it's around maximising the benefit of funding streams, being able to work together. So something that I experienced in terms of the relationship we've got with Abercroft and the commissioning models is the multiple approaches we have to actually designing these schemes and then evaluating these schemes. And we've certainly got an opportunity, I think, to really streamline that standard evaluation approaches and linking to the healthy behaviours work that we're doing with Suffolk Public Health at the moment, that bold new approach. I think we can deliver some real benefits around that. Co-location, continue on that journey. And actually in terms of those wide benefits about assessing benefit through multiple lenses, we could talk about this for a long time, but definitely we've been on a journey, we've been on it for a long time, we've got the foundations in, you can see the scale and range of programmes that are being developed, and there's more that can be done. Thank you.
Great. Warren, Jill, thank you very much. Peter, did you want to add anything?
I think just a final point for me, with the commissioner head on, there's ultimately three sources of funding. There's ourselves, the district council and the county council, and I think we need to look at all of this work and think about how we spend our money into the future and the quantity of resource, how much spending on prevention, because we have financial rounds every year. And one of the things that we're wanting to work closely with partners is to demonstrate the benefit of this, because it clearly is working in different bits across West Suffolk. We need to make sure that those that are non-recurringly funded are recurringly funded, and make sure that standard is across all of the areas. I'll perhaps give you one example. We had the maternity presentation, which we've got some great work from the leisure partner in some bits of West Suffolk for mums before birth and some after birth, but it would be great to get that for both sides of that birth experience for mums, for their health as well as the success of their birth. And that's a really good example of, we've got bits of that, but we need to commission proactively, I think, to get that for all of our mums as one example.
Thank you, Peter. And Warren, Jill, some great examples there, so really inspiring. Just before I come to Ed for a question,
I'd like to know that if you had the figures, the breakdown between the secondary care referrals and the primary care referrals, how much are GPs using this service, and goes point. You know, be really good to communicated in much primary care, because that's where the real connection with people and their lifestyles does happen. Admittedly, pulmonary and cardiac, obviously, but generally speaking, we know. But my other point I'd like to know is the cultural breakdown of this, if you like. I don't quite know the demographics of West Suffolk in terms of that. I do of tendering, obviously, in Colchester, but like, how do you appeal to people from cultural groups within your community that perhaps don't have lives, that have very different perspectives on lifestyle and exercise, like swim, simply because it wasn't part of the thinking of that cultural background. So how do you approach the differences in cultural backgrounds and beliefs and overcome?
In terms of dealing with cultural differences, one, I think we're on a learning journey. I'm going to be really honest with you. We as a leisure centre operator, in its purest term, I don't think we are particularly great at that, I'm going to be honest. And we work with a number of different organisations to learn. So, for example, perhaps not, if I use an example using Home Start, we're not going to pretend to understand what those families face as barriers. So we try and use Home Start as a conduit to understand that. They are far closer to that audience to understand the challenges they face. And we learn from that iteratively, if I'm honest with you, in terms of through the programs that we work with. And we try and work with them to break down the barriers. They're our communication channel. Because if we try and work around other organisations that are close to those communities, actually the message gets lost. It doesn't get communicated in the right way. We don't understand that. So where we think there are challenges in communities, we try and work with organisations that are already there working with those communities, rather than working around with a slightly different message or approach. And actually, we think at the moment, we haven't evaluated it brings better outcomes because people feel more comfortable speaking to those organisations. They then trust them, and then in turn they will trust us as long as we can fulfil our part of the bargain. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. So you are going into using different community leaders, using their mosques, synagogues, whatever kind of other gurdwaras, all those kind of places where these communities work and mix.
Yeah,
or pray and mix.
There's far more that we can do, and certainly in terms of one of the things in regard to the way that we have a collaboration agreement with Abbeycroft Leisure, that's one of the actions on there around dealing with inequalities, but also not just running leisure centres for those people that want to attend leisure centres, but to do kind of like more outreach work and work with community groups as well. And that's where the partnership with our family and communities teams is really important. So, for example, in Newmarket, we've got great relationships with the interfaith groups in Newmarket, and looking at how we can then bring that in to broker those contacts, if you like, and to understand the challenges and opportunities that exist. Very much a journey we're on, though, and a lot more that we can do.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to go to Susanna and then Andrew, but perhaps if we could take those two questions together, and then Ed's also going to make a suggestion for a way forward, because this could be quite an exciting agenda, couldn't it, for the board as a whole. So, Susanna?
So, brief. We spent a lot of time talking about our integrated care strategy in quite a dry way, but what you've done this morning is really brought to life in just such a wonderful way what can do looks like in terms of delivery of that. So, with your help, what we'd like to do is to really kind of showcase that as an example, a case study for that, because a lot of the work that we're doing is of interest, obviously, across our integrated care system, but neighbouring systems as well. And I think it really brings to life what a lot of the things we talk about having shared estate strategy and, you know, working together and so on, but what that actually really looks like in terms of really making a difference. So thank you for sharing this morning.
Thanks, Susanna. Andrew?
So first of all, thank you for the work that you're doing. It's really inspiring, like everybody else. I'm interested in how you, or if you, try to level up health inequalities through the work that you do. It's something that we spend an awful lot of time thinking about, and it may be the next phase as well for you, but some people have a really rough deal in terms of the health outcomes, and I think you could be a a good partner in addressing that for us.
Lovely, thank you. I saw you nodding. Shall I take that as rhetorical? Are you okay if I do that? Ed, over to you.
Yeah, it was just coming back to the co-location point. So I think this would be a good board development item in the future, once we've kind of worked through the estates group, but to look at these opportunities and the learning that's been presented. And actually, there's a lot more we could do, I think, to build on the assets, as you say, Jill, in our system. So I think let's kind of take this forward as a piece of inspiration that we could scale up.
Okay, thank you. Everybody content with that as a suggestion? So absolutely not the last we've heard from you, I'm sure. You could well have inspired us to take this this forward with your knowledge, experience and guidance, I'm sure, but across the system. So thank you very much. I think Andrew used the word inspiring, so take it that you've inspired the board, and thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. In which case, let's move on to item 9, the JFP update, and I'm going to go to Richard. Over to you, Richard.
I'm not sure I'll be quite as inspiring, but I'll do my best with this item to make it exciting. So colleagues are aware that by the end of June, we've got to publish our 5-year joint forward plan, which responds to the integrated care strategy and also the health and wellbeing board strategies, and more importantly, also our constitutional duties as an integrated care board. Guidance came out, we're well underway with now producing it, and today I've just got a brief update because this is the last opportunity before we actually bring the document in final form for hopeful sign-off at our next public board meeting in a couple of months. You'll see at section 2 that we are recommending adoption of the same vision as our integrated care strategy, so alignment around a vision of everyone at all stages of their life being able to live well across SNE. And we're using the same methodology of the live well domain. So start well through to die well as our 6 key outcome statements for the local population of Suffolk and North East Essex. And then you'll see how we further then break that down at 2.3 through to 2.4, where we've set out under those 6 live well domains, as we're calling them, the particular areas of responsibility and areas that we're doing work on. And that's all underpinned, as actually Andrew just said, around a real focus on health inequalities that permeates through all of our work. For each of those sections, we're using a common methodology where we're starting with why is it important for the people that we serve? What do we know about people's local experience? How do we plan to make a difference? So that's the key statement, how. What are the specific things that we're going to do? And how will we measure those? And then as a case study for each of those sections. Importantly, underpinning those key outcomes, we've also, where our ambition is to set out a small set of top commitments or key commitments that cut across the plan to deliver by 2028. And the methodology for that has not been as easy as it might sound because there's loads of inputs to what they should be. So the public engagement that I'll come on to, our partner engagement, our joint strategic needs assessment, so the work that the 2 county councils support on, our strategies that I've already talked about, and obviously our national NHS long-term plan. So they're all the inputs that are guiding us to try and come up with what these key 10 commitments or around 10 commitments should be. You'll see at the bottom, page 42 in the pack, we're then going to outline them in a methodology that starts with the outcome, the commitment theme, what it is, why is it important, how we're going to know that we've achieved it, and then what specifically is a big idea that we'll achieve each year. Now, they may be the same each year, but we'll start with what we're going to try and do towards achievement of those next year. Really importantly, running alongside those outcomes, to start well through to die well, you'll see on page 43 in the pack, we're also obviously covering how will we work differently to achieve these priorities and what are our enablers to success. And you'll see the breakdown of those in that section. Clearly, our plan will be delivered through our 3 place-based alliances. We've just heard about some of the great work happening in West Suffolk. And also, each of our alliances are then developing their local delivery plan. You'll be glad to know from previous iterations, we've got it down from 300 pages to 100. There's still some way to go before you say it's too long. And there is going to be a 10-page exec summary and a plan on the page. So effectively, we're building it up. So dependent on the audience and the degree of interest stakeholders and colleagues have got, you can start with 1 page all the way up to the full document if you wish. I said I'd come back to the public engagement. Really importantly, our document is being shaped by the brilliant work that Susanna and team did through the development of the strategy, and also then complementing that, the work that Sophie Martin and Simon, I think is in the audience, have done to support us with our engagement efforts as an ICB. You'll see that under section 3. particularly if I can take you to section 3.5, where we ran a 5-week engagement exercise, which we had through our online platform, our Let's Talk SNE, face-to-face meetings, a variety of different forums that colleagues, including myself, have attended. And at the moment, we're just going through and analysing all the feedback that we've got to obviously feed into the plan before the final drafting, which is taking place this month into next. But just to give you a flavour at section 3.6 of some of the key themes that have come up, and again, hopefully they aren't coming as a surprise to many of you. These aren't particularly in an order, but just start with access. Access comes through loud and clear. It did in the strategy as well. Access to services for our local population. Probably unsurprisingly, after 3 years we've had during COVID, but that's a key challenge for our local population. Mental health, again, probably unsurprising, is coming through loud and clear as an area that we need to continue to focus on. Prevention, again, the item we've just had really shows that. Personalisation and reasonable adjustments. So how do we continue to personalise the health and care support that we offer to our population? Digitalisation, that's both a mix. So not assuming that everything should be digital, but equally, how do we do more with digitalisation? Workforce, that came through loud and clear, as we know, in terms of how we're going to respond to the challenges on workforce. Primary care, not just GP, but primary care more broadly, was raised a number of times. And then specifically children and young people with special educational needs came through loud and clear. So what we are doing, that's just a flavour. They were some of the main themes where, as I say, we're building the feedback in to shape those commitments and those priorities. And then just to finish, Chair, on next steps. So as I've already alluded to, we're using March and April to further iterate the document. We've got a development session, as you know, on the 14th of April. So we'll be particularly focusing on where we've got to on those 10 commitments. And thank you to all those who've fed in. Alex Roy, and bless him, in my team, is going around seeing a lot of you and your teams over the last few weeks with iterating that. We're then going to be taking it through to the ICP, the 2 health and wellbeing boards in May, alongside our colleagues from the other ICBs. And then it'll be coming through to here on the 23rd of May for sign-off before published in June. As I say every time, if anyone wants to talk to me or the team, I'm sure you'll be bored of me talking about the JFP, do drop me a note, and I'm happy that we spend some time talking through it in more detail. But I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Richard, thank you very much. And particularly thank you for flagging paragraphs 3.5 and 3.6, the public engagement, because I know how important that is, both to members of the public, of course, but also to board members. So thank you for that. Fanwell.
Thank you, Richard. I think it's absolutely right that health inequalities are sitting right across all the domains, and it should be everyone's responsibility. But how do we ensure that things don't get lost in that process and actually it becomes no one's responsibility?
That's one that we've been grappling with quite a lot. So where we've landed, or what we're recommending, Fanwell, at the development session, is that as part of the 10 commitments, we do have front and centre a specific commitment around tackling health inequalities, while it permeates through all of the others. The other thing I say is, you might recall, the board has actually agreed to set up a health inequalities and prevention subcommittee of the board. So that will specifically have a remit cutting across all of our work to ensure as a board we've got line of sight on the work that we are doing. And then finally, I know that we are trying our best to ensure that we've got a health inequalities pot that Howard and others have been doing brilliant work on, to also give us an opportunity to invest specifically in that area.
Okay, thank you. And any other comments from board members? Otherwise, we're asked to receive a note and agree the recommendation that this work continues at pace. As Richard has mentioned, board development session on the 14th of April, then to the product from that, then finally out to the ICP and the health and wellbeing boards, and then back here in May. And of course, Richard's also emphasised that he's open for comments and suggestions at any time, and you can dialogue directly with him. Everybody content?
Maybe Richard? Up to about 11 p.m. and back,
11
back
p.m.
at 8 a.m., 7 a.m.
Only, well, or you'll only answer up to 11 p.m. Yeah. Okay. Noted. Everybody content? Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Richard, and thank you for the work so far. We look forward to the next product. Let's move on to item 10, which is the integrated performance report. I'm going to go over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. The report seems to get longer and longer, so I will take the report as read. But if I may just say a few things, if that's okay. I'd like to cast your minds back to the first performance report, where we had a conversation about how our performance report would start to mirror our governance arrangements, and in particular the system oversight framework arrangement and different domains, how we would actually measure ourselves as a board in terms of performance. And what you start to see within this report is essentially a segmentation of that report that starts to pick up a number of things. So if you look at the first page, it talks about a quarterly performance review with our regional, regulators, and depicts really the many programs we've talked about actually at this board, and actually the recovery elements and our focus in terms of recovery. And you might loosely catch that in terms of leadership, in terms of how well does our regional colleagues feel we're doing as an ICB in terms of segmentation. So again, that section is quite important feedback in terms of how we move forward. And you'll note that the second meeting that we had was quite a positive meeting, and actually they are talking about cadence, and they are talking about broadening the invite in terms of this committee to that meeting in the future. So we wait with bated breath in terms of what that might actually look like. The second section really talks about the SOAC activity, and you'll notice within that there is a current themes that was running through the various programs. The focus on urgent care recovery, for example, is very clearly embedded in there. Elective recovery. So there is a very much a strong theme coming, but it's part of our assurance framework that feeds into our regulators in terms of joint working and MOU that we've actually got in place. I think the next section, which is yet to be completed, is essentially the operational delivery for 23-24. So Ed's already mentioned that we're actually in planning phase with our final planning submission due end of this month. And these are all of the indicators that will be expected to deliver as an ICB and as a health system. And as we agree the plans, we will populate essentially the target that sits within that report and be reporting, routinely back to this board in terms of how we are doing in terms of deliverable we are expected to deliver in 23-24. And then you have the soft framework, which essentially closely mirrors our governance arrangement and our various committees. A bit more work to do on those. But essentially, I'm sure you're aware there is a Patricia Hewitt review that may reduce those numbers. So again, we're waiting to see what the outcomes are, maybe to do any further work on the SOF. The bit that's probably missing, and a conversation I'm probably going to be having with Richard, is around the JFP. So again, we will be settling on a certain number of strategic programs, and it's probably going to be important if this board is aware how well we're progressing on the strategic programs, and we'll need to find a way of capturing that as we move forward. So essentially, that's a report, and as Richard said, I am more than happy to have an individual conversation how we might improve this report going forward, whether it gives the board assurance in terms of the data that they want to see. And of course, all this information is supported by Power BI, so you can delve into the data should you wish to need to do that. But before I move on and open up to my colleagues who are also part of this report, I'd just like to mention a couple of things. So if you focus on elective recovery, this report clearly states that we would expect to have about 50 patients that would be over 78 weeks, but by the end of the month. In reality, as we've heard, we had industrial action. There was significant amount of patients cancelled due to elective activity. I would commend our providers really to that quickly they move to try and rebook those patients. And whilst we will not hit that figure, I don't think, based on what I know today, and I will know more tomorrow, actually will be pretty close, I think, in terms of numbers. So again, the system moved really, really quickly to try and make sure we hit that target, essentially, of no capacity breach of 78 weeks. But that number will change as we move forward. What we've also seen, I would say, is across the patch is an increase in productivity across all of our providers, and we've seen a consistent delivery both across cancer and elective activities again. But I would not underestimate the challenge for next year on 65 weeks reduction, and we need to go one step further as we move forward. You can't help but notice urgent care is an area where we are really quite struggling. You'll see, any performance is not where we'd like it to be, even though the new target is 76%. 12 hour, delays in A&E are an issue. Despite the fact that we have one of the better performing systems around our discharges, our categories, our numbers, etc., we are still struggling as a system. And you will see throughout this report and previous report, there is a theme in terms of what we are choosing to take forward as a program of work in terms of what else we might do differently. And finally, just on that, clearly our demand and capacity modelling in terms of our planning submission for the end of the month is quite crucial as to whether we're going to achieve the performance we want to achieve. So, Chair, I'm going to stop there. There is a lot of information in this report, and just open up to colleagues should they want to pick out any particular issues in terms of their own areas of responsibility. Thank you.
Paul, that's great. Thank you. And a huge amount of information in this report, of course. Before I come to Ed, I wonder if Nick or Ewan, whether you've got any comments that you'd like to make on this? Happy? Yeah, no comments, right? In which case, over to Ed. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So just on the urgent emergency care, every system's put a lot of focus on ambulance handover delays, understandably. But I question whether we put sufficient focus as a system, maybe nationally, on 12-hour waits in ED, long waits in ED. The ED standard in the planning guidance for next year is 76% performance, long way from 95%. We know that long waits in EDs pose a mortality risk and morbidity risk. So I'm just questioning whether we need to up the focus on those metrics as much as we have done in other parts of the urgent care pathway. And that might be one for you to answer, but maybe for others in the room too.
So I'll have a go at answering it, and I'll bring people in terms of. So I think if you look at the data generally, and I'm going to be quite broad with the data essentially, but our activity is not particularly much higher than it was compared to previous years. If you look at ambulance conveyancing, it's actually reduced. If you look at our discharge, it's better discharge than it was probably before, and we're seeing improvement. There's certainly a steady state compared to other systems. We certainly put an awful lot of focus on frontal processes. I'm sure Nick and Ian will say, we've brought a number of processes to try and release somebody as quickly as possible to improve patient flow. There is, of course, the discharge funding that will support discharging as move forward in terms of further support. And I guess there are 2 or 3 reasons to why we are seeing some of the difficulties that we are seeing. One is possibly overcrowding the any department at a given time. 2 is patient flow within the hospital site, so that you can't move patients quickly as possible. 3 is physical space, and you might then get to the UTC conversation dip switch, for example, around what you might be able to do with that. Fundamentally, we've also had a number of challenges around COVID, and COVID numbers have been relatively high in comparison. But actually, I think for me personally, there is probably a flow issue we need to address to try and make sure we maximize the capacity that we've actually got. And this also lends us to another conversation, which is our planning submission, which is have we got sufficient demand, capacity to meet the demand we've actually got. So I agree with you, there needs to be greater focus. I think we're quite a way away from where we'd like to be. We've sort of thrown the kitchen sink into what the good practice guides are, but actually we are not made the difference I think we should be seeing. So I think you're absolutely right, Ed. I think there needs to be greater focus. And in part, this has also been picked up through the work that we talked about previously around the EKIS work, around what are the 10 top key characteristics of a performing system, how we're picking those up as part of the UECC program, which I know Andrew may want to say something a little bit in terms of the focus he's putting on that. So I would agree with your point. I think we are some way away from where we would like to be.
Okay, thank you for that. So let me go first to Ewan, and then Andrew, you were invited then to comment, and I think Nick might want to come in as well. So let me start with you.
Yeah, so I violently agree with both of you that we do need to put some more focus on the UEC pathways, and the reasons behind current performance will be complex, and we will need to do some work across the entire pathway from primary care through ambulance services, through emergency departments, flow within hospitals and out. We've got a lot of work to do to get to where we need to be over the course of the next few months.
Definitely a work in progress. Andrew?
There are 3 things that I'd like to introduce into the urgent emergency care workspace, if you like. One is much greater clinical engagement and involvement, which I think would help refine and bring in some new ideas, and also probably help drive a bit of change. The second one is to use some more robust improvement methodologies to actually drive but also sustain change, which we haven't done as much as we could have done. And the third is to work with identified partners at system level, improvement partners at system level, to again accelerate the pace of change of what we're doing. I've started bouncing around those ideas with system partners, and in the course of time we'll take that through the Urgent Emergency Care Committee and via that to here.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andrew. And I guess you'd emphasise it's a team game, isn't it? It's the only way of doing it. Let me go to Nick, Tanya, Frida, and then Richard. Over to you, Nick.
Not really a lot to add, Chair, from what's already been said. Again, we are putting additional focus onto the front door. None of us are happy with the current levels of performance. We're doing all we can to improve it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tanya?
Mine's a process question. Just as a non-exec, like wading through this is quite difficult when you're not in it every day. How do we have the assurance that the risks you're highlighting in this report are reflected into the risk register? So what's the process for those two documents?
Okay, so my team essentially that are working on and review the risk register on a regular basis, which is what you actually see picking up as part of the process of the UECC committee. One of the things that we do need to develop further is a risk conversation at the UECC committee itself, and that's working in progress. I would suggest what you're seeing is, if you want an ICB perspective of the risk, I think we need to be much more at a joined up sort of approach to what we think the risks are. But I can assure the board that the risk and safety issues are discussed constantly in terms of where we are as a system. We have daily meetings where we actually talk about the risk within the system. There are daily clinical huddles to review the risk within the system. But I think you're absolutely right. I think there is something about systemizing, capturing some of that in a much more constructive way. And that's somewhere the UCC needs to go.
Thanks, Tanya. And Amanda, would it be fair to ask you to make sure that that point that Tanya's made is captured in that future BAF work, and also the point that Paul touched on around system BAF? Yeah. So we capture both. Go on, Paul.
If I may, the thing that's not visible here is that unhelpfully, it's been called the BAF, which means something different to us, but essentially it's an urgent care assurance framework that has been given to us by the national team through the regional team, and we are currently updating that. So essentially, it's a book of good practice, and we have been measured against those good practice, and we're currently about 60-65% compliant. Large proportion of the non-compliant is things that we can't yet deliver, like a UTC in West Suffolk, for example. We haven't had yet the conversation, so it'll be a while before we deliver some of that. So that's been really monitored on a monthly, weekly basis in terms of progress against each of those key indicators. But to add to that, it's the EKIS work we've talked about, which is also overlaying the 10 key characters of the system on top of that BAF, is what we're doing. And we're about to have a conversation at the end of the month at the UECC to agree our work program in terms of how we can take some things forward differently. And with Andrew's support, we also want to talk about greater clinical input in terms of clinical leadership in that space.
Okay, thank you. Frida?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to bring in a little bit of, I realise how complex all of this is, Paul. I really do, and I don't know how you do your job sometimes. I'm sure it's very difficult. But from my perspective as a GP, when a patient comes in and asks, so what's the waiting time for this to happen? It's a really hard conversation when it goes over a year. It's less of a difficult conversation when it's about 9 months. It's probably, it's got to the point now that you kind of hope that someone has private insurance just to kind of not have that conversation with them. I know this is not on you, and it's on everyone, and it's national, and I realise how complex, and I don't even have the solutions. I just want to bring in the patient perspective, because I think that can easily get lost with all these figures, and how difficult it is for people to wait. And I do think primary care has a part to play. It's not just secondary care, and I think one solution possibly would be that we work better together. I think the way we're kind of separated a little bit, and it makes things more difficult. I think the more interplay between primary and secondary care possibly would help.
Go on, Paul.
If you cast your mind back, we had a really helpful presentation. We would be looking at our patient waiting a long time, and I worked in this. We made a joint of the dots in terms of long-care sector and what we would do, and the team went away to do some work. So that is probably due for an update, and I would suggest that I would take to the next strategic recovery committee to actually see where we've got to with that. But actually, there is tremendous effort being undertaken to try and make sure that patients wait well, if that makes sense. But you can always do more, because essentially the issue that we're going far too long. So I would take that as an action, Chair, in terms of making sure it's one of the next better changes.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Frida, for articulating that. Very, very well articulated. And as you were speaking, there were a lot of nods around the table in agreement. Let me go to Richard.
I just want to move us on to cancer, if that's okay, because we haven't spoken about that for some time. And actually, generally, some positive news from the figures that were in here. We had our cancer committee this morning, which was another great opportunity to bring partners together to really focus on the whole cancer journey from prevention through to secondary. But we always have a focus rightly on performance. So on page 53, you'll see some of the stats there. Just want to say on the outset, we're polling often at 110, 120% of activity referrals coming through from pre-COVID. And we're seeing over 100%, 105, 110% of treatment. So just the sheer scale of what both of our trusts are doing is immense. Now, that's not without challenges you'll see in some of the key performance indicators. But the particular one that we've been focusing on for some time is what's called the backlog. So the number of people waiting over 62 days, which is the national standard for cancer treatment. And the numbers you'll see in the pack in the middle of that page 53 have come down significantly. So you'll see they quoted ESNEFT at 596 people waiting more than 62 days. We're now at 273, still some way to go, but that's come down significantly in the time frame we had. And equally at West Suffolk, it says 156 there. We're now at 109. We're the only ICB out of the 6 that's still committed to trying to meet the target that was set. So each ICB was given a number effectively to say they thought it was realistic to get to that number. And both trusts recommitted to do everything they could to try and hit that over the next 3 weeks. So we're now the lowest. We've got the lowest proportion of our waiting list waiting over 62 days. So it's still not good. It's at 7%. That's a massive improvement in both trusts. I just wanted to put that on record. Thanks to all partners, but particularly our acutes in the work that they're doing on that. And then just as a part of that, one of the biggest areas of challenge has been colorectal. So the sheer volume of referrals coming through to the trust, particularly ESNEFT for colorectal. The trust is now polling at 12 days. So the standard is seen in 2 weeks, 14 days. At its worst, we had 454 people waiting over 2 weeks. We're now at 20. So that's a significant turnaround from where we are. Loads more to do. But I just thought it was useful to give you the latest stats from what was in the pack because it's an improved position. Thank you.
Richard, thank you very much
Can I
for
just
flagging
come
that.
into
Yes,
that
do come
point?
in, Frida.
Richard, that's a really good example of how primary and secondary care can work well together because the colorectal numbers have come down because there's been a diktat into primary care about using the FIT test before we refer, and that has made a significant difference. So all the GPs now are just using FIT, and if they're negative, you don't refer on the 2-week wait. That has made such a difference. That is a way we can work together, and it shows how we can.
There's still a bit more work to do, though. But absolutely, that the proportion of GPs who are actually now using the FIT test has gone up. There's been a lot of work from Alice, our GP leads, to try and do that. But yeah, there's still a bit of variability, as I think Nick's implying. So more to go up. But you're right. That's how we should be working in partnership between primary and secondary care on some of this our cancer work.
Richard, thank you very much. Frida, thank you for making the point. And yes, Nick was making the more to do point. Thank you for that. But also as a board, perhaps we could reiterate Richard's thanks, but to our acute colleagues, of course, but to our primary care colleagues as well. And as Andrew said on a different subject 5 minutes ago, it's a team game. We won't solve this individually, organisationally on our own. System works. So thank you very much, and please pass on those thanks, Ewan and Nick and Frida's colleagues. So thank you. Okay, any more questions for Rich, Ed? Sorry.
Just I didn't want to lose Tanya's point about if you're not in this daily, reading this report may be quite complicated to understand. So maybe just have a chat to you about whether it's a simpler narrative report in front of all the data. I know there is narrative in here, but I think it is a fair point, and members of the public reading it as well. So perhaps if we could just have a look at that, not debate it now, but have
And Paul, it's just a suggestion. Maybe that's a conversation that also you could have with Health Watch colleagues who might well be able to help with that thought process, if possible. So thank you for that, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose what it's questioning me is about how we're started on other performance that other partners are looking at in their own. So I look at mental health performance slightly different to what you're presenting here, but we're not getting the full picture. We're getting a good sense of how mental health is being performed, other performances here. But if I'm looking at our AMP capacity and the way we're responding to pressures in the community because we can't access beds. We're not really sharing a strong enough story with the ICB to understand the system pressures that we're under. And I think we just need to think about the mechanisms which we can do. We can work together, Paul, so that we tell a much richer picture. Maybe not as much information, but a much richer picture, maybe on a deep dive or something where we can really tell the story of the challenges. I think that's something. And then just another point is, I think on the JFP, just again to make that connection. So the JFP tells a story of where the priorities are in the JFP and how that looks from a performance perspective. So you can pick the two up and say, actually, we understand why you're saying that in the JFP because we can see your performance needs addressing in here.
Paul, let me just bring in Susanna and then I'll come back to you if I may. Susanna?
So Patrick makes a really good point about the need to look kind of more broadly, if you like, from multiple dimensions. Frida made the same point at system pressures. So an action that I'm taking forward through the ICP is to set up some away time to reflect on our experience around system pressures, but from a much broader perspective, and to do a little bit of work up front to try and, if you like, tell that story maybe in a slightly different way, because performance data, as you say, is really useful, but actually there are other ways that we can look at that as well. And the point was made very well at the February meeting of the ICP. I think there's a letter from the LGA about the need to kind of, really bring together and get, one version of the truth around some of the system pressures. So watch this space, there's something coming up soon.
Right, watch this space, Paul.
Yeah, just wanted to come back to that. I totally agree with you. But I think we do need to remember one thing, is that our ICB committees have got delegated accountability for performance. And it is those committees that should be having conversation about detailed performance and how it all gels together, and then make recommendations to the ICB in terms of where we are. So perhaps there is a conversation behind how we want stuff, because there is a danger here that we have so much data, which I think part of the data meant that actually we don't lose the wood for the trees, because you don't actually fully understand without actually being in that committee. So I'm more than happy to have contact. We can simplify the storyline. I think that'd be absolutely great. But let's remember that the committee is there to review performance and the detail performance that's behind it.
Thanks, Paul. And then a quick one from Richard, if I may.
I was just going to expand on that, actually, in a similar theme. So on the mental health one, we've got the collab paper later, and I'll come on to that. We've got the work that's happening in Essex that we're coming back, I think, in May. But effectively, we need to look, as you're saying, Patrick, at all the partners' performance through those collaboratives as an example. Clearly, we've got a statutory remit for certain things as an ICB organisation. But as Paul's saying, I think there's other mechanisms to do what you're exactly saying. And for mental health, we've definitely got the vehicle to do that through the emerging collabs.
Yeah, and Patrick, I think that's what you wanted to hear, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay, great. So with those comments, colleagues, we're asked to receive a note, and we look forward to the next iterations, Paul. So thank you for being so open to those suggestions, and thank you for making them. Colleagues, everybody content? In which case, thank you. Let's go on to the governance update on pharmacy, optometry and dental. Maddie, is there any possibility that you've got a couple of points and we could go straight for questions if there are?
Yes,
any?
of course. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. So this paper is a very short technical paper in which we are asking for your approval simply for the updates to the ICB governance documentation, scheme of reservation, delegation, functions and decision map to reflect our new accountabilities, which will come into play on the 1st of April, and at which point we will welcome under our commissioning 174 dental contractors, 160 optoms contractors and 174 pharmacy contractors with a budget of £79 million, and the transfer of a very small number of staff from NHS England. So this is a really important milestone in this process, and certainly it's not job done. We've only just begun, and this will be a really important year of transition. Thank you.
Oh, Maddie, that was lovely and brief. Thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions or points that you'd like to make? Frida?
Yeah, thank you, Maddie. Briefest ever. Just a governance question is who's representing them here?
So that's a good question that we will need to return to. The alliance committees will have together, individually, but most likely collectively, the accountability for all of the primary care functions. So we will be looking to representation within those committees.
We will also, meanwhile, be advised by the advisors from NHS England, so the dental advisors, for example, and as is noted in more detail in the paper, that Herts and West Essex, on all of our behalf, will provide the leadership for pharmacy and Optom services, and we will join their committee, as noted in the paper, for those functions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Happy? Yes, go on.
I just feel for our 174 dental, 160 Optom and 174 pharmacists, there is no representation in SNE. That hasn't answered the question at the board level, apart from perhaps Nick and I as the GP, but there isn't anything for them.
Let me just go to Susanna, Maddie, if I may. Go on, Susanna.
So just to say that for the Integrated Care Partnership, whereas the budget border, all of them are represented on the Integrated Care Partnership. So in fact, we have, I think, 2 pharmacists, dentistry, optometrists and so on as well. So they are represented at that level.
And Ed?
Yeah, it's a fair challenge. I think it's come up previously. We haven't resolved it, Frida. We need to sort that out. So let's we'll get to an answer, I'm sure.
Sorry, but just before I come back to you, Maddie, Frida, would you be acceptable to approving this as a working draft?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just scared that it might be me and Nick.
Okay.
It's total selfishness.
So it's not an objection, it's a next stage, if you like.
In fairness to these colleagues, it is about representing them fairly and properly, but also, also on a selfish basis. I don't know their issues. So if it came down to myself and Nick as primary care, we are GPs, and that point needs to be remembered.
Understood. Maddie?
Thank you. So may I suggest that we put that formally on the action log and we return to the next meeting with a position going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Maddie. And Frida, thank you. So we'd effectively be approving this, assuming we approve it as a working draft, and expect improvement. I mean, all documents should be open to continuous improvement anyway, shouldn't they? And Maddie's suggesting noting that on the to-do list. Everybody happy with that approach? We're asked to approve then the update to the ICB governance documentation as presented to reflect the upcoming pod transfer of responsibilities. Everybody approved? Great. Well done. Thank you very much, everybody. Now, what I suggest we do is 20-4. We are 10 minutes behind, but if we can be really fast on the next item, we could perhaps have a 5-minute coffee break before we then complete the agenda. So no pressure at all, Richard. But you've got 7 items to seek board approval for here in the recommendation. So on the Mental Health Collaborative, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do my best at being succinct, letting people get their coffee and tea. Just quickly by way of background, this has been a long time in the making, and a number of you around the table, Kirsten, Andy in the audience, Stuart, have been on this journey with us back since 2019, when we developed our Mental Health is Everyone's Business strategy through our co-production work. And we're 4 years now into that, and there's a huge amount of work that's been happening to continue to improve services. This is within Suffolk. I'll come back to Essex towards the end. Where we've got to now is that it's culminating in a proposal coming today around now moving towards setting up a mental health collaborative for Suffolk. And I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean. So section 2, why do we want to establish a collaborative? And then I'll explain what it is. Hopefully you've had a chance to look through the paper, but effectively we feel that we really do need one place, one forum collaborative, which looks at end to end, all the way from preventative through to specialist, with all the right partners around the table looking at it, as opposed to in a siloed way, perhaps as we used to do in time gone by with a traditional commissioning model. To be fair, we did move away from that some time ago. And what's coming out of all of the work that we've done to date with partners, many of you around the table are in Suffolk, is there's an appetite to create a single focal point for mental health decision making within Suffolk. Suffolk, I'll explain later on around Waveney, if that's the right, Chair, so I might need a couple more minutes before coffee on that one. Effectively, we are recommending today under section 2.2, following a number of one-to-one conversations with many of you around the table, and a workshop that we held back in January, the set of that collaborative. What does that mean? Section 2.3 is actually setting up a subcommittee of the board called the Suffolk Mental Health Collaborative, which would effectively take delegated responsibility for mental health commissioning and provision across Suffolk. What we would look to do is then delegate through myself as exec director lead, budgetary responsibility through to that committee with myself as part of it, with a limit of 3 million, so in line with the other committees. The age range, all age, we had this debate, all age, whereas Norfolk is going at the moment with a children's and adult collaborative, end to end. So again, prevention all the way through to specialist in scope. In terms of Waveney, I said I'd come back to, we've negotiated agreement across the 2 county councils and the 2 ICBs, thank you to Sue and others, that the collaborative that I'm recommending here will take on the responsibility for children, so for CAMS. So there will be a member on the collaborative from the Norfolk and Waveney ICB in terms of responsibility, but we will see county in terms of children and adolescent mental health. That's under section 2.3. 2.4 just talks briefly about the initial work programme for the first 6 months, so a stock take of the progress on the 10-year strategy, the development of the supporting subgroups that are set out later in the paper, and a particular focus on children and mental health, IAPT, and our community mental health model, where we've got tons of work going on that. I'm happy to speak about that if colleagues are interested. Later on, under membership, you'll see the proposal on the members of that. So that's on page 133, including our VCSE partners through the chair of a proposed mental health network that we've been working with a number of our VCSE colleagues on. A lived experience forum, thanks to Andy, in terms of our existing group, the chair of that having a membership, and also Health Watch Suffolk as key partners, the police and our statutory partners. At the moment, I've been asked to chair this for the first 6 months, which I'm happy to do by partners, but we are going to explore whether an independent chair would be more appropriate once we've got this thing up and running after the first 6 to 9 months. You'll see the set of subgroups. Many of these already exist, but they're fragmented. So it's about how do we tie these all together through the collaborative. And particularly, I know, for instance, Sue through Suffolk County Council is looking at how we also bring in the council's mental health programme under the auspices of the collab. Ditto with NSFT and other partners. So this is the one place where we are making those decisions around mental health. Relationship with the Alliance, importantly, that is a change. So we are looking at this. This has been a subcommittee of the board, clearly working incredibly closely with our 2 Suffolk-based alliances. And indeed, both Maddie and Peter have got a place proposed on the collaborative. I should say the terms of reference will be coming back here, subject to agreement today on this as an outline to the next meeting. As I've already said, in terms of engagement, we've got VCSE, people with lived experience, and Health Watch as voting members of the proposed collaborative. And I'll leave it there. There's quite a lot in there, though, but I'm happy to take questions.
Richard, thank you very, very much. Let me go to Fanwell and then Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Richard. A very important initiative. I was in conversation yesterday with some school leaders, particularly trust in academies, and one of the biggest issues that they're dealing with at the moment is sort of this post-COVID challenges with children's mental health issues. I think there is a feeling that they are not as well represented in some of these conversations as they would want to be. Just wanted to find out, how are we bringing them into these conversations as well?
So I might ask for other help from Sue in a second, your own view, Sue, because I know you're playing a lead part in this part of the work. But we do have below it and propose to continue a children and young people's delivery group. So underneath the main collaborative, one of the groups we already have is that the group that's effectively taking responsibility for the development and delivery of our revised CAMS, or mental health for children's model, of which we do have engagement from schools and academies within that. I think we can strengthen it further though, Fanwell, but I don't know, Sue, if there's anything you wanted to add on that one.
Go on, Sue.
There are 2 associations for schools in Suffolk. One's primary heads, one's secondary heads. We have a very close working relationship with them, and we work very closely in any design of any service. So all of the send delivery work, which picks up the needs of children in schools with emerging mental health needs, is all co-produced with them, and we work very closely with them. We could strengthen, I agree with Richard, formal representation at the children's committees through the associations, and we'd be more than happy to do that as we develop further.
Okay, thank you. Good question, Fanuel. Thank you. Lisa and then Steve.
Thank you. So one of the operational groups is quality and performance, and I kind of linking back to Patrick's point about how do we understand as a whole. I think we've got a real opportunity here to think about quality in a different way, to not lose the person by looking at the indicators, but to kind of understand people's experiences through health, care, education, and as a whole, what the quality looks like. And I think it's really exciting to be able to do that, because we so focus on performance indicators and, you know, the numbers and the demand and capacity stuff. And I know we'll have to still look at that. That's really important. But it does give us an opportunity to draw a bit of a line in the sand and think what's important to people, what are our people telling us, and how do we understand impact and outcomes?
Thanks, Lisa. So well said. Never forget the individual, never forget the person. And as you were speaking, a number of colleagues were nodding in agreement. So let me go to Steve and then Stuart.
I'm happy to sign this off. So we can get to that as soon as you want to get to coffee.
Okay.
We've talked about a bit about how we deal with the Waveney problem we have because of geography and different borders. Silence on the North Essex bit.
Sorry, I said I'd come back to that, didn't I, Steve? So we are bringing a paper back to the next board on where we are with the Southend, Essex and Thurrock revised strategy, and then the approach to how we're going to work more collaboratively across the 6 commissioning partners and the 2 providers. So I will leave you with that dangling, if that's okay, but we are coming back with the proposals for that. We are not looking at one amorphous collaborative across the ICB. It would not work in terms of the arrangements, the relationships, the partnerships. They're very much county-based, but there is joint work always happening between the teams. So yes, this is part 1. Part 2 will be coming back with Essex across the 3 ICBs and the County Council in May.
Thanks, Richard. Let's take that as an action as well in the action log. So, Stuart?
I just want to reinforce Lisa's point, really. This really allows us to have a very different conversation. This is about outcomes for the population, but also about how do we together really tackle reducing health inequalities that we have across our ICS. And this is the perfect forum for us to do that.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you. So, Sam, go on.
Just to say, we have our Young Mental Health Ambassador group across Essex, which I know I've been feeding into this. We have now started an adult mental health ambassador group as well. It'd be really great to build exactly on Lisa's point in there.
Yeah, we do have one in Suffolk as well for young people ambassadors who are part of the work. But I'll pick up, there's a bit more to do on the Essex one before we bring it back in May.
Okay, thank you. So, colleagues, I think it would be fair to say that the board is supportive of this approach, that it realises it's a work in progress. We acknowledge that there is more to do, that terms of reference yet to come and be approved, North East Essex, the Waveney discussions and so on. But we're asked to approve. There are 7 bullets in to approve. I'm not going to read each one out unless you want to disagree with any of them. And the final one, of course, is to approve the direction of travel overall. Is everybody content to approve? Done. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. So I'm not sure that you did earn a coffee break there, but I think it'd be a good idea if we had one. Why don't we take a 5-minute stretch of the legs and back in, what time is it now? 15:52. So 15:57, we will recommence. Thanks, everybody. And colleagues, thank you very, very much. So item 13, ICP updates. Susanna.
Okay, so I'm under some pressure to be very brief here, so I will be very brief. So the paper just provides a very brief overview of some of the recent work through the ICP. You'll see a summary of some of the kind of key things that have been discussed at the last two ICP meetings. The ones I pick out were a very important conversation around the costs the NHS have delayed disclosure of child sexual abuse in England and Wales, and very importantly, a conversation about what we're learning as a system from the work of the 6 community ambition projects in ethnic minority community organisations across the ICS at the meeting in March. I just want to draw the board's attention to item 2B, which is that further to agreeing our integrated care strategy, what we've now started to do is to add in a lot more in terms of the metrics for the strategy. So if you do have time to go to the ICS website, you'll find that there are now dashboards containing multiple population health outcome measures by alliance area added in at the beginning of each of those sections. And we're working with Public Health in Suffolk to choose barometer indicators for each section as well. We've got a couple of events coming up, which you can see listed in the paper, and I'm happy to take questions about. But other than that, that's just a very brief overview, Chair.
Thank you very much, Susanna. Any questions for Susanna? Otherwise, received and noted, and thanks for all the great work that the teams are doing. Done. Thank you very much. Let's go on to item 14 then, financial update. Howard, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take the papers as read and focus predominantly on the planning round that we are currently in and seeking to conclude by the end of this month. And in particular, I'll just focus on some recent movements and our key risks. With respect to this financial year, our risk profile in terms of delivery of our financial plan has not changed materially. So I can still report that we are on track to deliver our duty to spend within our resources for this financial year, both as an ICB and also as a system as a whole. And that's for all the constituent parties, East, ESNEFT and West Suffolk Foundation Trust. As had previously been advised, this has come at the expense of applying a significant amount of non-recurrent solutions in this year, which has the effect of reducing those options as we go into next year and therefore making our challenge all the harder as we go into 2023-24. With respect to 2023-24 planning, so I guess first of all, just a reminder that we are working towards meeting that nationally set deadline of the 30th of March, and that we do have a duty to spend within our resources. The SNE allocation for next year has been confirmed at just over 2 billion. There's a lot of complexity within that, but perhaps just to focus on two things, one of which is that our allocation has been reduced for elements such as COVID funding and something called the convergence adjustment. The net impact of both of those is about £14 million. And the second thing is that our headline growth funding of 89 million is largely subsumed by inflation, mental health investment standard and capacity commitments. And so there's very little there in the way of allowing for growth. So the combination of those two things really is consistent with NHS England messaging that we need to deliver growth by getting back to pre-COVID levels of productivity, which is another way of saying, can we do more within our existing resources? So in terms of the current process that we're in and bits of guidance that we're waiting for on key delivery risks, I can report to the board that I think we're pinning down now to three things essentially. The first is the finalised guidance of the application of the elective recovery fund. So this is an allocation that we have received to reduce our backlog. And the risks or the financial risks associated with not hitting that nationally set target. So this is after what looks like the resolution of reducing our target closer to the national average from its position as what was the highest in England. And to that end, I'd really like to pay tribute to the work of colleagues in ESNEFT, Sean Watling and Chris Armitt within our ICB, and also a colleague in NHS England, Sarah Griffiths, who've been working incredibly hard over the last couple of weeks to work with the national team to try and get a resolution on that. But we're still trying to pin down the final bit of guidance. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we're working through is in relation to trust capacity and the application of the use of notified funding for social care and including discharge funding, which is there to facilitate improved discharges from hospital. And of course, this has a direct link to the capacity within our hospitals, the link to delivery of the elective recovery, etc. So that's something that we're also working through. And the third issue is, of course, the development and delivery of our cost improvement programs or efficiency programs, which for the whole of our ICS is £62 million, about 3%. And the ICB within that has a target of 13.5 million. So greater confidence in the delivery of that program will, of course, increase our confidence in our ability as a system to deliver a balanced plan and also make some of those key investments in areas that I know we're all keen to do. And some of them have been mentioned earlier in this meeting around prevention, etc. In terms of the overall system finance, so there is a table within the report which talks about what our draft submission looked like in February, and we reported a deficit position of £59 million. And since that time, the following progress has been made. So the ICB position through making decisions on withholding some discretionary investments as well as other adjustments has been able to move towards a small surplus of around 2 million. This has improved the position by about £15.5 million in total. We've also received about £21 million of external funding from NHS England, which is non-recurrent, but is also, I think, a real testament to the confidence that NHS England have in us as a system. And ESNEFT and West Suffolk Foundation Trust have improved their combined positions by about 8 million. So that's a total of about £45 million worth of improvements. And our current projected planning deficit is now standing at about £14 million. Very positively, all the partners in this system have stated their commitment to working towards a break-even position by the March deadline. Just by way of context, all other systems within the region are currently stuck at a rate between 50 to 80. That's 50 to 80 million pounds deficits. So we're definitely moving in the right direction in comparison to those systems. The final thing I just wanted to update the board on is with regards to the notification of ICB running cost allocations, which have now been confirmed for both 2024-25 and 2025-26. You may be aware, of course, that each year ICBs, as per their predecessor CCG organisations, receive an allocation to fund administration costs of the organisation. This is known as the running cost allocation. Our current funding is 18.8 million, which is about £18 per head of population. And by the end of 2024-2025, it will need to be 14.2 million, so or 14 per head of population. So that's a cash reduction of £4.6 million, about 25%. And once we factor in the pay inflation, it gets to about 30% reduction, which is, of course, in line with the national messaging. We're just working through the implications of the consequences of that. So I think at this point, I'll probably just stop there and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Howard, thank you very much. Any questions or points from colleagues? Otherwise, we are asked to receive and note. Shall we receive and note, but also send thanks to all our system partners, Howard's team particularly, of course, but all our system partners in heading towards what we hope will be the end point which Howard has forecast. So thank you to all. Everybody content? Thank you very much. Thanks, Howard. In which case, let's go on to the BAF item. So Amanda, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So here we have the updated BAF for March, having previously been updated and reviewed by the Executive Committee about 3 weeks ago. So since we last saw it as a board, we've actually got 18 risks currently live, which are being managed as we move forward. Since the last review, we actually have a new risk added, risk 21, which is pertaining to the delegated responsibility which we will undertake from the 1st of April regarding POD, which we discussed earlier on. We have closed one risk, risk 26, from the last board meeting, and that's referencing primary care and access to Afghan nationals and the like. And then risk number 9 has been updated to reflect the CQC report for NSFT. And then the workforce risk has been reviewed and updated since quite a good conversation that was played out at People Committee. So we can see that that has actually increased from a 12 to a risk rating of 20. And my last comment, Chair, was just to remind us all that we have the board development session coming up in April. Thank you.
After which we will review again.
Indeed.
Okay. Thank you, Amanda. Thanks for that update. Any questions from colleagues? The amendments, as Amanda has summarised, noted and approved. All agreed? Done. Thank you very much, Amanda. Amanda, you're on a bit of a roll here, aren't you? ICB Constitution, unchanged, I think, but over to you.
Indeed, thank you, Chair. So since we discussed at the January board, we invited members to feedback any comments in readiness of today. We had one comment received, which was a suggestion, and that's detailed within paragraph 2.3. When we received that additional comment regarding what patients can expect from us via the Constitution, we did sense check it with Region, because we know there are very strict rules and guidance with regards to what we can and cannot do with our legal Constitution. And they confirmed that even if we were to put forward the suggestion, it would not be approved. So at this moment in time, it does remain unchanged, but what I would like to add, though, back in the context of the patients and what they can expect from us, I think we can articulate that very well in our terms of reference, which are appended to the handbook. So I think we have opportunity to further review any terms of reference going forward pertaining to patient and patient safety, quality and safety being one. But at the moment, the Constitution is as is.
Yeah.
Further opportunity review in July.
Okay, so the reference to which you're referring, your suggestion is take that forward through the handbook, in terms of reference in the handbook. Everybody content with doing it that way? In the absence of agreeing that, we wouldn't do it at all, I think is the short version. So shall we do it? We'll do that in an appropriate way. Happy with that, thank you. And then Constitution then unchanged, but next review, 12-month anniversary, July 23, which actually isn't that long away, is it? No. Noted? Okay, thank you very much, Amanda. Subcommittee terms of reference. Still with you, Amanda.
Thank you very much, Chair. So when we actually approved the subcommittee terms of reference at our first board meeting in July, we committed to do a further review, and that was on the back of the conversation that we had as a board in September. So from September, we said, let's review current terms of reference for the subcommittees. It takes us to now, hence the paper today. And as we can see within the report, there are two pieces of information which I think are relevant. The first is within section 2, and that articulates all of the current subcommittees and whether there was a required change or otherwise, and I think colleagues will clearly see those. And there are 6 subcommittees that are suggesting a terms or a change primarily to membership. And then what we have underneath that are all of the terms of reference, and for ease of reference, any suggested changes predominantly to membership are shown in red. So they are the current changes to the current subcommittees that we approved through terms of reference in July. But there is a new terms of reference which we haven't seen as a board, and that was the last terms of reference called the Commissioning Governance Process Group. And it was felt through conversation at a recent executive committee that we needed to have this group in place to manage any conflicts of interest that could put partners in a difficult position. So the thinking is that we will create this group and it will meet as and when required and predominantly virtually. And the membership is contained within the terms of reference. And that's really all I wanted to add, Chair, but it really does protect us as a board in terms of how we manage conflicts going forward.
Okay, thank you. Before I come to Andrew, Amanda, assuming we approve today, when would the next review be?
I think that would be 6 months, but I will take that as an action to double check.
So it'd be either September or, because you want to do it frequently enough, but not too frequently, otherwise, yeah. So
Absolutely.
should we, are colleagues content that we ask Amanda to review that and make a suggestion as to the next review date, or do you want to set one now? Should we delegate that to Amanda to work out? Happy to do that. Thank you, Andrew.
With the permission of the board, I'd like to suggest one further change. So on page 265 of the pack is the start of the terms of reference for what used to be called Strategic Digital Investment and Assurance Board, which is basically our digital PMO group. In line with the convention, there's only one board and everything else is a committee or a group. We would like to change that to Strategic Digital Investment and Assurance Committee, and also make the appropriate changes in terms of reference to reflect that change of name. Would that be acceptable? I'm sorry it didn't make the cut in terms of the papers.
Don't worry. So board to committee, does anybody have a problem with that? Agreed. And with that one change are the terms of reference as presented, and with Amanda's description of the embedded changes, which hopefully are very clear to you. All approved? So approved today, and next review date to be advised. We'll note that as in the action, in the matters arising as an action for you, Amanda. Thank you. Good. Thanks very much. Let's go on to item 18, delegation of direct commissioning for specialised services. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. So colleagues may be aware that one of the areas that NHS England currently commission is a set of services called specialised commissioning, which, as it says on the tin, effectively is a number of services that are relatively small in scale, but very important. At the moment, the proposal at a national level was that ICBs, integrated care boards, took on responsibility for elements of that from April 23. Following a process, it was determined that across the 6 integrated care boards that make up the East of England, that we would actually defer and go with April 2024. And indeed, much of England went down that route. Over the next year, we're therefore working across the 6, our fellow 5 ICBs and the regional NHS England team to effectively go through a process of due diligence to effectively take on jointly that function from April 2024. So it will go through effectively a very similar process to what Maddie and Lizzie Mapplebeck have been supporting us on the previous paper you just heard on pharmacy, optometry and dentistry. So we've got a year. The reason we're bringing this paper here today is that we need agreement across the 6 ICBs and NHS England through the joint working agreement that you'll see appended to this covering paper to set up a joint committee. So there'll be a joint committee of the 6 ICBs and NHS England that runs over the next year, that sits under as a subcommittee of each of the 6 ICB boards with representation from each. So myself as executive director is the proposed director lead sitting on that board with my peers. We're also proposing, though, within Suffolk and North East Essex, we effectively have a subcommittee that is an opportunity for a number of different members, including partner members, likely to be from some of our provider partners, to advise us as we move forward as a member of that wider committee across the region. It's fair to say at this point there's still a number of unknowns. So in particular, the final list of services you'll see in, I think it's Schedule 3 on the joint working agreement, there's an initial set, but there's further work going on around which particular lines or service lines within specialised commissioning that would be delegated, how the budgets will work. That's a significant element of this. And Chris and Howard and others are involved through a working group with their peers across the region on that. So as of today, the same report you'll see here is going to all of the other 5 ICBs to agree the setup of the subcommittee between the 6 ICBs and the region, and then further work to develop the proposals as we move forward over the next year for delegation from April 24.
Richard, thank you. Any questions or points for Richard or colleagues? Otherwise, there are actually 3 recommendations in the paper. I think it's probably worth going through these individually. To agree the joint working agreement, including the draft regional tour, terms of reference, and the setting up of a joint commissioning committee in 23-24. Secondly, to agree that the joint working agreement can be signed by the ICB's accountable officer, which is Ed, of course, on behalf of the ICB. And then thirdly, to note that there is further work required for the transition or to full delegation to ICBs from April 24. Everybody content with the recommendations? All agreed? Lovely. Thanks, Richard. In which case, item 19, the highlight reports. Now, there's a bunch of them, 8 in fact. I'm tempted to simply say, are there any points that individuals would like to flag or highlight from each highlight report? And are there any questions? So let's go in order. So first of all, audit committee, Stephen, I know you'd like to make a point.
I do need to update the board, yes.
Yep.
The audit committee, it was an extraordinary audit committee, actually was established, fixed for last week with the intention of receiving the annual report and annual accounts for our 3 predecessor CCGs, and critically, the external auditors report on the same auditor's view on those accounts, which would have then led to us making suitable recommendations to this board about those accounts. Disappointingly, the external auditor was not able to complete the work that had been promised. Is maybe a strong word. I don't think you get proper promises from external auditors. Certainly we've been assured that it was going to be happening, and it didn't, and we were advised of that, I think got wind of it our way about 24 hours before the committee was due to meet. We cancelled the committee. We will now be meeting, I think it's the 14th of April,
okay,
to conduct that business.
So you've got a replacement date, and at the moment you believe that will go ahead with the appropriate reports.
I'm not really good at those.
No, okay. You anticipate?
I think that's a better phrase.
Okay, good. Any questions? And sorry, Steve, I didn't mean to cut you off. No. Is that you done? Any questions for Howard?
It probably is just worth noting that we are the last, as in predecessor CCGs, to have had their accounts signed off in England at the minute. This is not because of any actions in the CCG. This is because of our external auditors, and we have been working quite hard in terms of trying to establish different options, etc. But it is important, I think, that we hold them to this date now in April.
Absolutely. Perhaps we could record the board's support of that sentiment, that we expect that the external auditors will so deliver for the April 14 audit committee meeting. All agreed? Thank you very much, everybody. So quality committee, any points? Andrew?
I just wanted to take the opportunity to raise I suppose the feelings is the best way to describe it, of the members of the Quality Committee through their last meeting and previous meetings as well, which they felt was important to make explicit to the board. As we discussed already, there is at the moment sustained and unprecedented pressure on all medical services, all clinical services across the system, and that comes with a risk, not just the risk of adverse effect on health outcomes, but also the risk of moral injury on staff associated with burnout and with desensitisation of staff. And the Quality Committee, we're not willing to let this become the new normal, and they're absolutely dedicated to continue working to improve services, to prevent what we're seeing at the moment becoming something we routinely expect. And they wanted that risk to be made explicit to the board, and I suppose to get support from the board to continue doing what they are doing in that work.
Thank you, Andrew. Any points or questions? Otherwise noted. And then Finance Committee, Edward?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add other than what Howard has told us all today.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Received and noted. People Committee, anything from you, Tanya, that you want to add? Any questions from colleagues? None raised. People and Communities Committee, no report received as yet. Estates Committee, anything to add? Nothing to add? Any questions? Noted. And then Digital Investment and Assurance Board, again, Andrew.
Again, just one thing to draw to your attention, if possible. It has been challenging in this year to agree on the future funding model for the digital PMO, the digital group that we have in the ICB, not because of any unwillingness to support it, but because of concerns that people aren't quite sure what they're supporting. So to understand that better and to find a way forward, the Digital Committee is performing a baselining exercise to understand exactly what work is happening across the system through all system partners, what resources are available to them, where is there duplication and where might there be gaps, which will lead to a strategy refresh and which will obviously come through this board for information.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Noted. Thank you very much. In which case, item 20, attendance log, again, only to receive and note. Any points? Otherwise, received and noted. Thank you. Any other business non-notified? Does anybody have any to raise? And no AOB, which is great. Thanks. So the next meeting is the 23rd of May, and we now go to questions from the public. Now, we have a number. Some we've dealt with already at the beginning of the meeting. I think, Simon, I'll come to you for questions, if I may, raised during the meeting at the end. But let's see how we deal with the questions that have been raised prior. Maddie and Nick, I think you are going to deal between you with the question from Catherine Chappell, the Campaigns and Regional Engagement Officer, around the recognition of facilitating the introduction of discharge lounges, etc. Who shall I start with? You, Nick? Yeah.
So a specific question was raised about the use of the physio gym for additional bed space. The physio gym was converted into Snape Ward over the Christmas period as a result of severe capacity pressures on the acute site in order to continue to keep our patients safe at the front door as well as in our community. Additional bed capacity was required for a temporary period. The use of this space as bedded capacity or discharge lounge has been agreed up until the 31st of March, when it will be returned to the therapist team. During this period, the usual levels of service have been provided in the large gym and maintained, and also re-provided in community locations. The Integrated Pathways Division would like to explore the longer-term option for a hub and spoke model to continue in order to provide care closer to home and support green travel for patients. The therapy leads to exploring options associated with this currently.
Thank you, Nick. Noted. Maddie, did you want to add anything? All done? Okay, thank you. Second question was from Anthony on Palantir, but I think we dealt with that earlier. Nothing to add, Ed, to that. So, and we took an action. Yes, come on, speak.
I did ask if there would be a statement at this board meeting about Palantir. I mean, to say that I'm disappointed that NHS England has ignored your request for information is the least I can say. This is going to affect everybody in England. The government intends to instruct the NHS, people like GPs and others, to give confidential information to a private company that's only interested in profits. I recommend you read, if you haven't already done so, a letter that Peter Thiel, who runs Palantir, sent to his the people who invested it, so he did it for money. He made some outrageous statements in that. He talks about the stuff that their software is at war with European software. I think it's important to have a statement here today
that you oppose the idea that Palantir is given access to our data, all of us, without any consultation with us. And you'll remember that before the pandemic broke out, the government attempted previously to have our data given out, and millions of us opposed it and opted for the opting out. There's no such process as I understand it, and I think the public in Suffolk are entitled to hear from you that you think that this process is totally unacceptable and that the public should be informed about what the government intention is, what Palantir's intention is about making profits. And Peter Thiel, in his statement, said, we made loads of money, these are not exact words, last year, and we're looking forward to making even more money in future years. I, on behalf of the public of Suffolk, would like a statement that you oppose this proposal and that you properly inform residents in Suffolk about what's going on and what could be the fate of their data, medical data.
Anthony, thank you very much. I'm going to go to Ed to see if there's anything to add to this, to what we decided earlier. But at the moment, just for board members' benefit, we've taken an action to re-prompt NHS England for their position on this, and then the action for this board will follow that. But Ed, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think, as we said previously, this is a national issue that would require a national response. I don't think we're in a position to do that locally. We will ask again for that information from the national team.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question again is from Anthony regarding the 30% funding reduction. Ed, and then if necessary, I think you'll refer to Amanda for the question here.
Yeah, so we've spoken about that requirement. We're going to be working through what it means for us and potentially consulting with our staff in the summer. And that's probably as far as we can say today, and obviously working with our unions.
And Amanda, did you want to add anything to that?
I don't think I do, Chair, at the moment. I think that's something that we'll bring back to a further board meeting.
Okay, thank you. And the next question also from Anthony is on public involvement. And Richard, I'm going to go to you.
Sorry,
for the.
Could you read out the question? That would help.
Well, I can.
We don't know what
Well, I didn't realise that, Nick. Thank you very much. Good point. Good point. Thank you. Well, Richard, because some of the questions are very long, Nick, let me go to you, Richard, to paraphrase. If you paraphrase the question.
Anthony can tell me if not, but the gist of the question was how is the public involved in decision making within the ICB and more broadly the ICS? It's not actually my area, but Sophie Martin is working on a response to this. But effectively, the scheme of reservation and delegation, which I think we saw partly today through the constitution item, sets out how we approach that. And I think, Susanna, on the website also for the ICS, it sets out the decision-making relationships between the ICS and the ICB on the working together across the system. But Sophie, who's obviously eminently more capable than I, is setting out a fuller response, Anthony, to you in terms of decision-making, public involvement within it.
Okay, so more to come on that. And the next question, which I will read out, Nick, thanks for that prompt, because the answer here, I think, is that we don't know the answer to it yet, but a written response will come. And that's Anthony saying he would like to ask a question at the next board meeting relating to active living, supporting people to move. The government, on top of its decision to reduce the budgets for ICS's next financial year, has cut the budget previously announced to encourage more cycling and walking by £380 million. What will be the impact of that decision on our Live Well commitment in the ICSs? So written response to be supplied to that one. And the next question is, or the issue to resolve, sorry, is Barbara Robinson's point, which she raised at the last meeting. And I know this is a work in progress, but I'm going to go to Richard again.
So Barbara raised a couple of questions related to ME and chronic fatigue syndrome services in terms of, firstly, their importance, rightly, and they are a feature within both our strategy and our joint forward plan. But Barbara has some specific questions around the changes and would they trigger consultation, etc. A couple of colleagues internally are giving a written response to Barbara. They're meeting, well, they've met this afternoon. I did speak to Barbara at one of the JFP events. Barbara was there and dealt with some of it. There is a question related, I said, in the actions related to more to, I'll pick up with Sue, public health, some of the joint strategic needs assessment work that's slightly outside of our control. So we'll also make sure that's part of the response as well. But just say Barbara's also a key partner within our work on the ME and CFS work that Nicola Brunning and Paul's team and Narendra Evans in mine is working on.
Okay, thank you, Richard. And then a final question raised prior to the meeting from John Hunt on the JFP. So again, if I could go to you, Richard, to paraphrase the question, and over to you for the answer.
So the question was, which I partly dealt with under the JFP item, what impact has the public engagement had on the actual document itself? As I said earlier, firstly, the initial draft has already changed as a result of a lot of the feedback. So we've kind of peppered that in from the section leads as that comes in. It's changed the nature of it, but we're going through a final iteration, as I said, over this month and next. We're also going to put within the document some of the specific quotes and comments and reflections from some of the engagement we've had. So we actually link it directly back to the feedback that we've had from partners and from the public, and Sophie and team have been helpful in that. So hopefully once John sees the final document and the report that Sophie's developing on the output of the engagement exercise, then we'll see that, he'll see that, but that will be coming through in May to the board.
Wonderful. Thank you, Richard. And with that, I'm going to go to you, Simon. I don't know whether you've got a microphone there or not. Over questions raised during the meeting. All yours.
Sure. Okay. We've got 3 questions. All of them come from Barbara Robinson. The first question relates to the ICS Estates page statement with regards to ICS approach to planning and growth population expansion proposals. And she refers to an extract from the document which says the approach looks to ensure that existing patients are not disadvantaged through population growth, whilst also making sure the increased population have adequate access to a fit-for-purpose health system, which is able to provide the right care at the right time in the optimal care setting. And she asks the following, and refers to Ipswich Borough Councillor consulting again on Ipswich Garden Suburb application on Red House Park. She's saying here that there is little substantive change proposed to this hybrid application from the one on 2022, and she's included a link. The questions she asks are, will the ICS please issue another hoarding objection? Second question, will the ICB ask for a revised health impact assessment? And the third question is, surely the public need and deserve GP provision, not a pub on site?
Okay, and we'll take those as requiring a written answer, given that they were raised during the meeting. So, Simon, was that it? Okay. So with that, colleagues, 1640. Oh yes, go on, Anthony. Go. Do you want the microphone, Anthony?
You can't hear me.
No,
okay.
no, we can. But
okay, Ed made a reference to the COVID-19 booster spring provision, saying it's going to take place in April. Well, you and I know that could be April Fool's Day, or April the 30th, or any day in between. Does Ed actually have precise information on that? One of the reasons I'm asking is that I contacted 119 last week to find out about this process, and was told that they had received no information and therefore they couldn't answer any of my questions. And one of my questions is in relation to the groups that have been identified as being have access to this booster, the 75 plus and whatever. However, from a personal point of view, I received a letter from NHS England a while ago saying that they're aware of my current health condition, and because of that, they were going to send me some COVID testing tests, and because they considered me to be in a delicate situation or whatever. Now, it seems to me that if NHS England can send me the tests, should I get COVID, that's a reactive response. My preference would be a preventative response. That is, because they've identified me, and obviously loads of other people, I've got no idea of the numbers, as being at risk or whatever, and would be entitled to antivirals within days of testing positive, wouldn't it make sense to say all those people who have been so identified should be added to the list of those who will be eligible for COVID booster?
Got it. Good question. Thank you. Let me go to Ed.
Thank you. So, Anthony, I'll ask, I've got your email address, so I'll ask Liz Maloney to follow up with you to talk that through. The programme starts in care homes on the 3rd of April, and for the over 75s and the immunosuppressed from the 17th of April from memory. So I'll double check that, but I think those are the dates when the campaign starts. But Liz will follow up and answer all your questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, in which case, let's call it 16:43, so just before 4:45. Great meeting. Thank you very much all for your contributions. We'll call the meeting closed now. We can stop live streaming and we'll take, should we have a 10-minute break before the next meeting, and then we'll reconvene at, shall we say 5 to 5, okay? 5 to 5, everybody. Thank you very much indeed.